So hello, I'm Frederick Dunn, and today we're going to be looking at something interesting here. This is a yellow jacket wasp nest. It's a large one. I thought I'd take this opportunity to show it to you very close. And what you're looking at right now, those are the droppings at the underside of the nest, the cast-offs from what the wasps have been eating. So I thought since this was such a large nest, I would take extra time, get you up close and personal with it. And then you can see how it's made. You can see all these layers, all these materials brought together to form the paper that encases the different galleries where all the cells are. Most of these are female worker wasps, yellow jackets that a lot of people have very unpleasant experiences with. And if you look at some of the cells that have these light colored translucent caps, you'll see the pupae moving underneath of them. Now we're coming into the end of the reproductive cycle for this nest. Today is October the 7th. So this nest doesn't have a high population the way it would have 3 or 4 weeks ago because they're winding down. Therefore, the pupae are hatching out, the workers are spreading out and gathering resources because the final cycle for this nest is going to be new queens and males, also known as drones. But I thought it would be cool to scan over the surface and show you that this is made out of paper or wood pulp. Sometimes they do gather their resources, their cellulose, from different grasses and plants that are dry, but usually you'll see them chewing away on old sheds, fence railings, unprotected, unpainted wood. And then they work it up with their saliva and they make this very intricate paper nest, which requires constant maintenance. So this time of year, if you see these outside hanging from trees and things like that, for example, the bald-faced hornets, which are really just wasps as well, if they're not being maintained by the wasps, then it deteriorates fairly fast because birds will even pick these apart when they're outside. This nest is in a protected space. And the problem for me was I had bee equipment stored in this building, and this thing is attached to the bottom screen board of a flow hive. So I decided to let them continue to work on it so that I could check it out and see what they're doing. And so today I'm showing you what the nest looks like, and we're going to be pulling apart these galleries so that you can see inside these hexagonal cells and see what the wasps are doing. So again, most of these workers that you see scooting around are female worker wasps. They're going out this time of year. They're getting a lot of nectar. In fact, all castes of wasps will drink nectar. So this is why the honeybees get a lot of pressure from wasps like yellow jackets. And they can also predate upon honeybees and other insects. And that's why some people like them, because they'll also take out caterpillars and a lot of pest species that are around your gardens and things like that. But when you're a beekeeper, as I am, we don't want these next to our beehives, and that's because they put a lot of pressure on the bees. These yellow jacket wasps can fly at colder temperatures than the honeybees can, and therefore they can exploit those unprotected early morning openings when the temperatures are cold. And they get inside and they're going to take nectar, they're going to take honey from the bees, and if they can, they'll also steal animal protein. These are predators. They eat animal protein. Now the adult wasp itself is not eating the animal protein. What they do is they fly out, they find the insects that they want to feed upon, caterpillars, whatever it happens to be, they chew them up, and then they get inside the hive here, and they'll pass it on to nurse bees that are taking care of the developing larvae inside this nest. And I'm going to show you some of those as we get further along here, because I'm sure you're wondering what's behind all this protective paper and what do these galleries look like when we look down into the cells. Would there be eggs? Would there be larvae hatching? And if they are, why would they be hatching out new larvae as late as October 7th? Because the nights are getting cooler here in the state of Pennsylvania. These nests are ultimately being vacated. which means that as the wasps are hatching out, foraging, they're not replacing them with a bunch of the working foragers as they would have several weeks ago, when this nest would have had probably 6,000 occupants. Today it's much less than that. That's why we can get this close to it. And you're going to see some workers hatching out, and you're going to see some eggs, you're going to see some larvae, and we're going to talk about how the wasps take care of those things. Now, if you listen carefully, you hear the buzzing of a wasp. That doesn't sound quite right. So there's something else I observed here, and I believe that several of these residents in this nest are suffering from a virus. And it's known as Deformed Wing Virus, or DWV, and a lot of times honeybees can get this virus, and the result is that their wings don't develop correctly. They can't fly. Now, until I was looking at this nest, it hadn't occurred to me that native species, or species of wasps like these, would also be susceptible to the virus that deforms their wings. But if you listen to that buzzing, that's what it's coming from. A wasp is trying to fly, and its wings aren't working. Also, you hear a lot of other wasps in the background moving around through this building, through the space. And you can also, if you listen carefully, hear them chewing at the paper that composes their nest. Now, if you look at the wings on this specimen right here, they're not developed correctly. The left wing is held snug against the body, but it has an uncharacteristic bend to it, and the right wing failed to develop completely. If this were on a honeybee, we would call that deformed wing virus, and I do think that these yellow jackets have some kind of virus too that's impacted the development of their wings as well. And this isn't the only one. We'll see others as we continue to watch through the sequences. Now you may be wondering, if you don't get rid of this nest, will these wasps reoccupy it next year? No, they don't. They use these wasps just through the growth season, through the summer into fall. They all move out and abandon it, and then these paper wasp nests that are left behind do not get reoccupied. Although in the spring they could build a new nest adjacent to it, for example. Now in the southern parts of the United States, for example, where the temperatures are warmer and the seasons are longer, you may have a nest lasting much longer, getting much larger. So you can have anywhere from 5,000. Some nests have been up to 100,000 workers. So in the southern states, more time for them to do that. Up here in the northeastern United States, their period is much shorter, and that's why the numbers are much lower this time of year. Now this entire nest, all of these workers that you're looking at, are from one single queen wasp. She lays all the eggs. There are other nurse wasps that will take on feeding and caring for the developing larvae, but there is just one queen who lays the eggs, and her egg laying is going to change as we get into the later part of the year. And she's been laying worker eggs that are not capable of laying eggs themselves, And she's been laying drone eggs, which are the males. But the males are instrumental this time of year because they're going to have to mate with new queens that are going to be hatching out. And we're going to show you those eggs too. All these light white translucent caps have pupae in them that are developing and will have to cut themselves out. I'm going to give you a close-up of one of those emerging. What we're looking in, it's like these different caverns, these passageways that they use for ventilating, for warming their brood, for protection from the elements, but there again, they're inside a building, so protection from the elements isn't really necessary. And the cell shapes are hexagonal, just like honeybees. The only difference is honeybees would be considered like vegan wasps. They make all of their cells out of beeswax. And of course the wasps make all their cells out of cellulose, wood products, pulp, and saliva. And that's why we see these rings of different colors, because those are the different wood resources they were using when they reconstructed their nest. And it makes for very interesting patterns. That's why some people collect wasp nests, and they like to spray them with hairspray and things like that, and then hang them on their walls for decoration. But this one we'll be taking apart so that you can see what the inner workings are like. Now I've taken some long forceps here, and I'm going to carefully pull apart the nest. And one of the amazing things really is I've learned if you move slow and steady when you're working around a wasp nest, they actually are very tolerant. Even though here I am dismantling their nest, and they could build this all back, by the way. But I'm going to take each gallery out one by one, and we're going to look down in the cells and see if we can't find eggs being laid by the queen. We'd also like to see if we can find some larvae that may have hatched. And we want to see who's feeding them. So if anything, they're annoyed by the forceps themselves. These forceps are 13 inches long, so you can keep your hands well away from them. And a couple of these workers do try to sting the forceps, but they're not going after me, which is very interesting. If we can just stay calm and slow and steady. And checking out the camera, of course. And this is going to give us a much better look. Now to you this might seem like a brutal practice. We're taking apart their nest after all, where the nursery is. But we're at the end of the year anyway, and this nest is soon going to be abandoned, so I thought it would be a great opportunity while it's still occupied to see what's going on in here and spend some time looking at things. Now today the outside temperature is about 78 degrees. So it's not bad. I don't feel a lot of heat coming off of any of this, but I'm looking for where the worker bees, not bees, where the worker wasps might be concentrated. And that should show me where they might have active brood. So now if you suddenly hit them or made a lot of vibrations or knocked the nest around, then you would get a much different response. But they're actually being surprisingly tolerant. So we're pulling this paper apart. It's actually pretty tough. And we're going to expose these areas so we can get a look into where the cells are. So we can see a concentration of workers right there between these galleries here. You can hear their feet scampering across the paper. Trying to give you the most immersive audio experience that I can and getting you nice and close here. Now, of course, if I just wanted to get rid of everything and not do any exploration or any dissection, I could just take the whole nest, put it in an industrial black plastic bag, set that out in the sun and overheat them. Or you can put them in a black plastic bag and stick them in a freezer if you've got a big enough freezer, and keep them in there for 30 minutes and they would be all frozen. So instead I decided to just dismantle the nest and get in close and see how everything is put together. So we'll start at the bottom here. Nothing in those cells. No big surprise. Of course, remember several weeks ago this would have all been better guarded, more brood. We're going to look for eggs here. I also hope that I can possibly spot the queen. There's only one queen. The workers don't lay eggs, but they do attend to the brood. I'm getting a little upset there. No great surprise since we're dismantling their house. I'm actually surprised that they're as well behaved as they are. Now I suppose I should say something about whether you should be doing something like this, and I highly suggest that you do not, unless you're well protected and you understand what the risks are, and of course you're not allergic to bee or wasp venom. High chance that you would be stung. You should wear protective equipment. But if the movements are nice and slow and steady, I'm surprised by how many of these workers just continue to do their tasks, even though I'm here taking things apart. There's another wasp there with deformed wings. Now we know that honeybees can get the deformed wing virus, generally vectored by Varroa destructor mites. I'm not sure how the yellow jackets would be contracting that virus. Got the little white caps here. You can see that a lot of these workers have recently hatched out. Some are in the process of hatching. I don't see eggs on that frame, but we're going to take a closer look there on that gallery. We're going to keep moving higher because higher up inside the nest things should be warmer, and I would expect to see some examples of reproduction there. And you can see the screen there. Remember, that's a screen bottom board from a beehive. And they managed to build this nest out because it was in storage. And I just didn't notice. I sent my grandson in to sweep up the floor for me, and he came right back out and said that there were wasps in there. And I thought he meant a tiny wasp nest maybe in the ceiling. But instead it was this nice sized yellow jacket nest, which presents a great opportunity. Oh, we got some eggs in here, so we're going to come back to this piece later. I'll give you a nice close-up look at those. In the meantime, let's just get these other segments out first. And I'm trying to keep my eyes peeled for the queen. I don't necessarily really have a firm grasp on what the queen yellow jacket would look like. People are kind of vague at identifying the queens for you. Did some brief research online to see if there were any photos of what a queen yellow jacket looks like. Maybe you can help me out. If you see one, if you see the queen, please put a timestamp and a comment down below this video. There you go, got some hatching going on there. There's a worker with her head out. Now there are twice as many wasps flying around in the air around me than there are on the nest itself. That's why you're hearing all this surround sound noise here of wasps on the wing. Speaking of wings, here's another wasp with deformed wings. This is a pretty serious issue in my opinion, because I didn't know that yellow jacket wasps would have deformed wing virus, and if they do, I wonder if we shouldn't be reporting this to someone who studies or traces the spread of that disease. Now these wings are not damaged by taking the nest apart. If you look at the way they're configured, look right on up to where they attach to the thorax. They're deformed from the beginning, and of course this other wasp comes along and tries to chew and rip those bits and pieces off. This wasp will never fly and probably is going to expire. If these were honeybees, of course, we'd be looking for varroa mites, and if we had deformed wing virus, we'd be concerned about that colony. Now here, they are passing resources mouth to mouth. The term for that is trophallaxis. So foraging wasps would go out, they'd kill something, chew up the protein animal parts, bring it back in and pass it mouth to mouth, and that's trophallaxis. And then the nurse wasps that are in here would be feeding that pre-chewed protein to larvae in the cells. So this behavior tells me that we should find eggs, and that we should also be able to find some hatched larvae in here. Wanted to get that one down in one piece, but tore it in half there. Now normally if these were outside and we were putting these bits of nest on the ground, at night the skunks would come through and just eat them. But this is inside a building, so we're not too worried about them being eaten by something else. This will allow me to come back and look at these pieces and see what the wasps do with them, if anything. Because remember, they're not necessarily in nest building mode this time of year. So I don't know how much repair they will actually do. That's a good piece. And again, we're in the higher portions of the nest, so this is where I would expect to find some eggs because it takes advantage of the natural warming that happens higher inside. Deformed wings again. I think that's one that we've looked at before. But these are definitely not healthy yellow jackets in here. It's quite a few examples of wasps that have their wings deformed. Now this entire nest was started in the spring by a single foundress wasp who just found a place, started to build a nest, laid about 30 or 40 eggs. Those eggs hatched out and workers began to take over the tasks of maintaining the nest, hunting and foraging, and then feeding newly hatched larvae while the queen just would continue then to lay eggs. More exchanging of resources there between those two. So each yellow jacket wasp nest that you find is started every year by a single queen. So they're social through the warm parts of the year, but as winter arrives, the queens head out on their own, winter over in humus, decomposing leaves, old rotten logs, things like that. And they mate in the fall before they head out. And then they're all ready to go for those that survive until spring. Here's lots of eggs. Look in the bottom of these cells and you'll see the white little grains of rice in there. This is much like looking for eggs in a honeybee hive. And if you look top center there, you can see one of the eggs near the outer surface. Also, some of them had hatched, so they've changed their shape. And you can see that there are actual larvae in here that are wiggling around. More exchange of resources here. And wherever the queen is, she doesn't leave the hive. So all of her resources, all of her feeding has to be brought in for her. And she's going to eat only nectar, of course. The adults can't digest animal protein. So what they do is they stick their heads in the cells. Once an egg is hatched, they tickle the larvae in there. Like this one has its head deep inside, so we're guessing that it's feeding a larvae. So that's a hatched egg. And then the larvae exchanges fluids with that nurse wasp and feeds nectar back to it. So they give animal protein to the larvae regurgitates nectar back to the worker, and the worker gets a little reward for taking care of that larvae. So now these eggs, notice that there's, by the way, a big difference in age and dates of production in here. We've got all these eggs. We've got freshly hatched larvae, which means that they're less than a week old. And the rest of the cells are either empty or they're fully grown or developed pupae that are hatching out right now. Oh, and there's larvae moving dead center right there, squirreling around, so it needs to be fed. So what these will be, the first hatchlings are probably going to be males or drones. They're going to be needed because we're several weeks, by the way, before these are going to hatch out. So in these developmental stages, they've got a long way to go. So we're looking at the end of October. We should see nothing but queens coming out of these cells and drones. So we have the males that are going to mate with the queens, and then the queens will depart the nest, and they will again start a new cycle, going through winter solitary, and each queen, each one of these eggs potentially, will develop a queen that goes out and starts a new colony in the spring, or it's going to be a male whose purpose is just to develop and of course mate with the queens. And unlike honeybees that mate with drones from other colonies, these queens will be mating with drones from the same colony. There may be exceptions to that if there are other nearby yellow jacket nests, but here I don't know of any locations on my property where we have other yellow jacket nests on this scale. This is by far the largest one I've had, and I'm happy not to see them bringing in chewed up thoraxes of honeybees. Oftentimes this time of year honeybees are casting out drones. They're also sometimes pulling out developing drones that are in their pupa state or sometimes larvae state drones, and they're casting them out at sunrise on their landing boards, and then you'll see yellow jacket wasps like these hitting those landing boards and chewing bits and pieces off of the cast out bees, and then they'll be bringing them back, of course, to feed their next generation. Yellow jackets can also be seen, of course, at all nectar resources because they all drink nectar. They all want sugar syrup, they all want honey. But of course, if they're bringing in meat, that means they're raising larvae here. And you can see them. Now this is a much older bee, this is a wasp. And you would expect that if the queen is hanging around in here somewhere, and she must be because that's where the eggs are coming from. This one has a deep crease in her thorax up near her head. Her hairs are worn off. Her wings are a little frayed. She seems a little older. So maybe you can tell me, does this look like this could be a queen? If it is the queen, I was hoping to catch her producing an egg, or maybe the other attending wasps inside the hive would come to feed her. She is inspecting all the cells the way a queen would, and there's some exchange through trophallaxis there. And maybe she's the queen. I don't know. She's not really that distinctive, but she is behaving in a way that's different from the other nurse bees here. I always make that mistake. Not nurse bees, wasps. And of course they have 5 eyes. They have their compound eyes on the sides, and you see the 3 tiny eyes in the middle there, ocella, and those are used for detecting motion and just primarily light and dark. They're simple eyes. I hope that you found this presentation interesting, and I hope you enjoyed the look inside this wasp nest. And I am going to leave these setting just like this, and we're going to see if they hatch out and see if we can see the larvae developing. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.